Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The main ideology that is attacking Islam today is liberalism. So this talk, inshallah, is going to be about liberalism. And I've been asked to make this a little bit more technical or a little bit more in-depth than just a general talk. So if you have any questions at the end, we'll have a lot of questions. We're going to go till Maghrib, right? So inshallah, we'll have plenty of time to address questions as well. So what is liberalism? What is this ideology that is, I'm calling, the most toxic, the most anti-Islamic ideology today that is affecting, I can say, 99% of Muslims in the world. It's either affecting their thinking or it's affecting their lives. It's affecting how they can live their lives. This is the dominant ideology that's imposed by governments on the entire world, imposed through international law. So do you know how the United Nations has certain laws that they apply to the whole world? The whole world has to accept these laws, and they force every government to accept international law. If you violate international law, then you're going to be prosecuted in international court, and your country can be sanctioned. It can be even invaded because it violates international law. So this is the global order, and they call it a rules-based order. We have rules, and everyone has to abide by the rules, except when we don't want to abide by the rules, then we can violate it. But everyone else has to abide by the rules. These rules are based on liberalism. This philosophy, ideology of liberalism. So what is liberalism? Liberalism began in what's called the Enlightenment in Europe in the early 19th century, and also the later 18th century, early 19th century. And it's this philosophy that's based on atheism. The atheists at this time in Europe, they wanted to reject the Bible. They had already rejected the Catholic Church because of something called the Protestant Reformation, which happened in the 16th century. So they already rejected the authority of the church when they had become Protestants. But then they took one step further and they rejected the Bible and Scripture and the authority of God. We don't need God to determine how to live our lives. We don't need God to tell us how to live our lives, how to worship, how to be good people, how to organize our families, our marriages. We don't need the Bible. We don't need God, revelation. We have the mind. We have science and reason. And we can figure out what is the best way to live life. And these Europeans had been traumatized because of the wars that followed the Protestant Reformation. There was a break within the church. Protestants came on one side and Catholics on the other side, and they were fighting in these bloody wars for centuries. And over 5 million Europeans were killed in these wars. So their philosophy was that, see, religion causes war. Religion causes death and killing and violence. We need to use reason and science in order to understand how to live and how to organize society, how to organize our nations. This is what the period called Enlightenment. And they were very militant in their newfound ideology. The ideology of the Enlightenment led to the French Revolution. So if you read about French history, you know that in 1799 there was a revolution, and so many churches were destroyed, and so many priests, Catholic priests, were killed. So many Christians were killed. Why? Because according to this new reason and enlightenment, religion is something that holds you back in life. It's something that leads to poverty and backwardsness in society. It leads If we maximize everyone's individual pleasure, then all of society is going to improve. And there's no good beyond that. There's no good beyond your personal pleasure. So when I debate atheists, I'll ask them, what's good? How do you define good? And they always have to define it in terms of your personal pleasure. What you feel is good, what brings you bodily pleasure from eating, from doing certain things, from intimacy, that kind of pleasure, that's what is good. There's nothing good beyond that. This is what they claim. But this is a very materialistic ideology, philosophy, and it's a corruption of human nature. If you understand this point, then you can really deconstruct human rights, you can deconstruct liberalism, you can deconstruct this entire Enlightenment philosophy if you understand this one point. That the human being is not a pleasure-seeking machine. We're not pleasure-seeking robots that we just want to go and get pleasure. And that's what's going to make us happy. That's what's going to satisfy us. This is a lie. This is the myth that the Enlightenment atheists created. They created this myth because that definition of human being serves their philosophy. If you accept that definition of human being, then you will have to accept liberalism, because liberalism is the philosophy that will increase your pleasure, increase your individual personal pleasure. So this is why they push this idea of this definition of human being. That's their trick. And when you push that definition of human being, then you have to accept liberalism, because you have to maximize pleasure for the individual. You have to accept feminism, because you want to maximize pleasure for women. You have to accept LGBT. You have to maximize pleasure for someone who is homosexual. You have to accept transgenderism, because that's maximizing the individual happiness and pleasure of the transgender person. You have to accept, even ideas and identities that we don't even know yet. They haven't been invented. So, and these identities, some of them have even started, because people are saying that, oh, well, I actually identify as a cat, or I identify as a dog. This is real, this is actually, it's not even new. I've been teaching this material on liberalism for many years, and 5 years ago I was in Florida, and I was teaching some high school, college-age students, and one of the students said, yeah, in my school we have someone that identifies as a dog. I was shocked, I thought this was just theoretical, but no, said, yeah, it's real. Someone in my school identifies as a dog. There was a parent or a teacher meeting, and with administration, we have to make sure that we don't misidentify the dog. And I couldn't even understand how you can accommodate that. But if you accept the idea that individual happiness is the first and foremost value, the priority for every human being, then you have to accept that identity and other identities too. You have to accept them on that basis of that philosophy. So this idea that at the core of what it means to be human is just to seek your personal pleasure, just to seek what satisfies you personally, if that's your definition of a human being, then all of this philosophy comes with it. It's packaged. So this is the agenda. So then how do we define human being? What makes a human being a human? If we're not a pleasure-seeking robot or a pleasure-seeking machine, that all we're doing is seeking pleasure, we know as Muslims, we know what the purpose of our creation is. Our purpose is to seek Allah, to worship Him, to seek His pleasure. His pleasure, not our personal pleasure. That's what a human being is. Doesn't matter if it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim. That's the nature. That's the fitrah. That is the fitrah that Allah has created us upon, is seeking the pleasure of Allah. And the true satisfaction and the true happiness in the overall sense, in the sense of the akhirah, comes from seeking the pleasure of Allah. So do you see the complete opposite? The reality is the complete opposite of what liberalism teaches. Other things that will cause bodily struggle or pain or suffering, when you are worshiping Allah, fasting, you avoid eating and drinking for the day, that causes you suffering, can cause you pain, that can cause you struggle. Praying, salah, that causes you struggle, that requires effort. You have to avoid your desires in order to follow the deen, in order to worship Allah. In so many respects, in so many different areas, in ibadah, in avoiding the haram, we put our personal pleasure to the side for the sake of Allah, for the sake of obeying Allah and worshiping Him. But this is not something just for Muslims, because someone could come and say, well, you're just giving your religious view, and we don't accept your religious view. So like when you debate an atheist, for example, or even you talk to an atheist, they'll say, well, I don't accept your definition of human being. I still think, like, I'm not going to pray and fast and do all of this stuff, or jihad fi sabilillah. I'm not going to do that. So why should I accept your understanding of what a human being is? But this is the way that you explain it to them. You say that, no, the denial, when we say that humans are not pleasure-seeking machines or robots, this is found in every culture. This is found in every religion. When you look at all the different religions and cultures and human history, human civilization, you find that there is different institutions that are universal, like marriage. Marriage. In every culture, in every society, you have marriage, some form of marriage, which the word marriage might be not be used, but it's an idea of long-term commitment between a male and a female. This is something that's found in some form in every human society. Why? Because it's human nature. This is something that is based on human nature. But what is a marriage really about? A marriage between a husband and a wife. What does that mean to have a relationship? It means that you have rights and responsibilities. You have certain rights in that relationship, and you have certain responsibilities. They have certain rights, and they have certain responsibilities. That's what connects you. So, for example, in marriage, not even just in Islam, but in all cultures, the husband is usually the leader. He's usually the head of the household. He has certain responsibilities to work and provide food and shelter and protection. That's his responsibility. And then he has certain rights. He has certain rights over his wife. And his wife, she has certain rights. She has the right to be fed. She has the right to be protected. And she has certain responsibilities. She has to take care of the children. She has to take care of the household duties and chores. This is what makes the relationship work. It's a mutual exchange. You give and you take. You give and you take. That's the only way that a relationship can work. There is no relationship that is just I take and I take and I take and I take and I don't give anything. That's not a relationship. There's no relationship like that. Even in a master-slave relationship, even when you have a master and a slave, the master has certain rights over his slave, but he has certain duties to the slave as well. And vice versa. The slave has certain rights and also has certain duties. Every human relationship is a mutual exchange that you have to have for that to be a real relationship. The problem, though, is if you say that no, you have to maximize individual happiness because you are a pleasure-seeking robot, pleasure-seeking machine, is just what is going to make you more happy. If you just take, and give nothing, yeah, that's going to make you more happy in the pure, in the calculation of what's going to make me more happy. So my wife, she has no responsibility, she has no duties, she just sits and enjoys, sits on the couch, and I work and I do everything at home. I take care of the kids, I bring the money, she does nothing. If the liberal idea that we are just pleasure-seeking machines is true, that would make her the most happy. But is that the case? No, that's not the case. We're most happy as human beings. We're most satisfied. Our relationships are the richest and most rewarding when it's mutual give and take. The brothers here know what I'm talking about. So this shows how the liberal idea or the liberal definition of a human being is completely false. It's completely false. Look at atheists themselves. They think that they're so happy and fulfilled. This is false. Many of them are deeply depressed individuals, and you can tell this when you talk to them, but they're just in denial, they're delusional. In reality, look at the average Muslim. The average Muslim who is waking up for Fajr, that is going to the masjid, that is fasting in Ramadan, that is giving sadaqah. The idea of giving sadaqah, for example, that money that you're giving, you could be spending it on yourself. If you're truly a pleasure-seeking robot that wants to maximize his pleasure, any penny that you have, you should spend it on yourself, on things that bring you joy and bring you satisfaction. Go travel the world, go buy the most expensive clothes, go experience the newest video games or the newest tourist attractions. Every penny, you should save it for that purpose. But actually, you become, when you don't spend on others, this actually has a big spiritual harm on you. You actually can feel that selfishness, that you just are consuming, and you don't actually give to others. You don't spend zakat. You don't give sadaqah. You're not helping others. You get sick. It causes people to get sick. That's because we are not pleasure-seeking robots. That is not what human beings are. And this is not something that we know just because we're Muslim. This is something universal. This is universal human nature because that is how Allah has created us. That is how Allah has created us. So whenever I have a debate with an atheist, I bring these points. I say, look, we have this universal ground of human nature that everyone accepts. We have institutions like marriage. Think about any organization, any institution. You have businesses, you have armies, you have bureaucracy, government institutions. They all operate on the basis of a chain of command, all on the basis of everyone has a defined role. You do your role. If you don't do your role, you're out of there. It's not about what you want. It's about what is necessary to preserve the organization. That's how every secular institution is run, on that basis of defined roles and responsibilities and a hierarchy, a chain of command. But when it comes to our masajid, they say, no, everyone is an individual. Like, no one should feel judged. Why aren't you accommodating different views and different beliefs? And why aren't you more open and tolerant to this group and that group? This is an attack on a masjid. This is an attack on the institution of masajid. And there was a government-funded effort to actually undermine masajid in this country. They made a documentary. Have you guys seen this? Who's seen the documentary? It came out of DC, actually. You didn't hear it? Okay, alhamdulillah. You've heard it? Yeah, so-called gay Muslims there. Yeah, you heard it? He probably was involved with it, yeah. And they had this idea of a third space. Have you heard of this third space? It's coming, and there's somewhere called, I won't mention the name just in case the masjid doesn't want me to mention any names, but it's a concept of third space. And the idea, it's coming from Christians, but it's like liberal Christians to liberalize Christianity and destroy Christianity. They applied it to Muslims as well. That, oh, the masjid or the church is such a judgmental place, and they're not accepting of different identities, and you have to accept people for who they are. You know, come to the masjid or come to the church as you are. This is their slogan. Because you don't want to be judgmental. And so they made this documentary where they interview like gay Muslims, quote unquote. They interview feminists. They interview Qadianis. And these people say, oh, I didn't feel welcome. I didn't feel welcome in the mosque. So I was pushed away from the religion. I was pushed away from Islam. It's like these sob stories. It's like this is emotional manipulation. This is emotional manipulation because some people will say, "Oh, these poor, we can't push them away from Islam. We have to invite everyone to the masjid." This is a psyop. This is a trick in order to undermine the masjid. To get the masjid, if you start to accept everything, you'll be destroyed so easily. There's no more structure. Just like any business, any organization that begins to accept everyone, every view, and you just prioritize every individual identity, is going to cause chaos. It's going to lead to all kinds of destruction. And a lot of companies are now realizing this. A lot of big corporations, they are realizing, oh, we went too far when it comes to this entire woke agenda, when it comes to accepting different identities, and they basically have this diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI standards, corporate standards, and they create this massive bureaucracy within the major corporations, within human resources, HR, to make sure that no one feels triggered, no one feels stressed, no one feels like their identities have been violated, and we have to make sure that everyone is happy and affirmed. We have to make sure to affirm everyone's identity. They realize that this is causing way too much chaos. People are no longer productive because they've been so pampered. They're not actually doing their jobs. We're losing money. And there's this idea of, go woke, go broke. We're losing money because we're just too woke. We have to pull it back. We have to pull it back and tell people, okay, at a certain point, we don't care about your feelings. Do your job. we don't care about your feelings. Do your job. So, because it's a very basic human thing, you have to have a defined role within a structure in order to make an institution productive and operational. They recognize that for their businesses. They recognize that for their profits, but when it comes to the masjid, when it comes to the Muslim community or any community, no, you have to be a free-for-all. You have to acknowledge everyone's individual identity. When it comes to family, you have to recognize everyone's individual identity. And they won't acknowledge that. This is deeply destructive. You're destroying communities. You're destroying family. The idea, for example, of transgenderism, this completely disrupts family. The idea that there is no such thing as gender, or you can be born something and your gender is actually completely different from your born gender. This is something that will destroy family. It disrupts society. But they say, you have to accept it. You have to accept it, otherwise you're a bigot. You're a transphobe. You're hateful if you don't accept that males can be females and females can be males. And they can use this whatever bathroom that they want. They can come into the masjid wherever they want. You as a parent have to accept your child no matter what. These are the kinds of things that will destroy family. They destroy community. They destroy marriages. And it ultimately destroys religion. It ultimately destroys religion. If the most important thing is your personal happiness, then why should you accept a religion that says no? You have to prioritize the pleasure of Allah. You have to prioritize obeying Allah. You have to prioritize above your own whims and desires. You don't worship your own whims and desires, you worship Allah. You don't worship your whims and desires, you align your own internal state. You align your way of life with the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is what they consider to be slavery. Slavery with a negative connotation. So this is the attack of liberalism against human nature. It is an attack on not just Muslims, every culture. Because every culture requires you to sacrifice. If you want to be a part of any community, you have to sacrifice, you have to fall in line, you have to put the group sometimes ahead of your own individual desires. Liberalism attacks every single culture, tradition, religion, and it creates atomized individuals that are just pleasure-seeking robots. Now, that has been destroyed as well. It's just single-parent household, single mom, and she has 1, 2, or 3 kids, usually from different fathers. That's the new norm. That's the new norm. Over 50% of children are born where the parents are not married. So this is how common zina has become. Just no marriage at all is needed for having children. So what is happening is that people are being individualized, atomized by themselves. So this is like a dystopia. This is like the end of the human race. This is destruction of the human race. And Muslims are also being attacked. Muslims are being attacked the most aggressively. Why? Because we have the best preserved tradition. We have the best preserved religion. We have the Quran that has been preserved, and Muslims memorize it, and we follow it. We follow the Sunnah. We've preserved the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Are we thankful for this? Do we recognize how unique that is to have a preserved book and to have a preserved way of life? Other religions don't have this. Christianity doesn't have this. Christianity, they can't even define God. In Christianity, they cannot define what is the meaning of the Trinity. And depending on which Christian you ask, they'll give you completely different answers. That's because their Trinity is so difficult to define and understand. It is so complicated that most of them, if you really push them, they'll say, oh, it's a mystery, we can't know. Okay, so the basis of your religion is a mystery that's unknowable. How can you preserve that? How can you pass that from one generation to the next? That's why they have so much apostasy. People who are leaving Christianity and becoming atheists, or they're becoming agnostic, or they're just becoming religiously unaffiliated, meaning they believe in some higher power, but they don't follow any organized religion. Judaism, the same thing. Judaism, they also don't have a defined understanding of God. If you read the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, you'll find certain parts of the Hebrew Bible that talks about many gods, that talks about a council of gods. That's in the Hebrew Bible, yes. Polytheism is found in the Hebrew Bible. This idea that Judaism is a monotheistic religion, it's more complicated than that. Judaism has had many different strands, including polytheistic strands, henotheistic strands. Henotheism means you believe that there's one head god, but there's also minor gods. That's henotheism. There have been Jewish groups that, in ancient times, that followed henotheism. And the remnants of these beliefs are found in the Hebrew Bible, because the Hebrew Bible is just a compilation of different books. So there's no comparison actually between the Quran and the Bible, even the Hebrew Bible, if you guys didn't know this. The Hebrew Bible has things like, so an analogy of what the Hebrew Bible is. Imagine if we had a book, okay, that was surahs of the Quran, but then we attached some books of tafsir to the Quran. We attached some books of tafsir. Then we added some books of hadith. Then we added some seerah, some books of seerah. Then we added some like Arabic poetry. Then we added some commentary on that poetry. And we put that all between two covers, and we said, this is our holy book. That's what the Hebrew Bible is. And then the Christians came and they added some more to that. They added some letters, like, oh, here are some letters from, imagine, like, here are some letters from the Prophet ﷺ to different kings. And we added that, and we put it all between two covers. And then, oh, no, we added some works of kalam as well. We added some works of philosophers as well. We put it in between two covers. This is our holy book. That's what the Bible is. If you look at, according to academics, there's over 100 different authors in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So, of course, the religion is not preserved. So that's why they're more liable to changing over time, to adapting, to adopting whatever is the dominant ideology. Same with Hinduism, same with Buddhism. All of these religions, they have nothing like Islam. So that makes us target number one for attack. Because these liberal powers know that Muslims have preserved their religion, and they're the ones who are resisting this ideology of maximizing individual pleasure. And you can see like the animosity that exists against Islam and against Muslims in the media. And the big in our lifetime, the big attack has been the war on terror. The war on terror is really a war that was designed against all religions, but they started with Muslims. But you'll notice that the same war on terror tactics that were used against Muslims after 9/11 is applied to all of these other groups. Traditional Christians, traditional Jews, they're all considered extremists because they will oppose LGBT, or they'll oppose feminism, they'll oppose the transgender identity, etc. They are considered extremists who are put on terror watch lists. And in school board meetings around the country, I think Virginia was some examples of it, where parents go to protest the LGBT curriculum. Parents who go to those meetings are put on FBI watch lists. The FBI was monitoring, and they probably still are. Christians, conservative Christians, or conservative Jews, and these are the tactics that were first used against the Muslim community. So I'll leave it at that, and we can just open it up for Q&A, inshallah. You can just raise your hand if you're here. You can put it, if you're on Zoom, you can put it in the chat, and we'll. I don't know if YouTube, there's anyone commenting. We can read those as well, inshallah. Yes.
Where is the ideology coming from? Is it a government, like organization?
The question is, where is the ideology coming from? It's coming from people who are educated through the liberal system. The system is designed to turn people into liberals and to view liberalism as the best way of life. So it perpetuates itself through the educational system, through the media system, and through government structure. So it's not like one race or one ethnicity or one group. There are a lot of Muslims that now are falling into this liberalism, and they're advocating it in the most brutal terms. Yes.
What do we as Muslims in America, stop or negate the liberalism in America? What do we as Muslims do?
What can we as Muslims do to combat liberalism?
Yeah, like stop it. What do we do?
We just hold on to our religion. We hold on to Islam, and we don't compromise. We don't liberalize. So I gave a talk earlier about feminism and how feminism is a sub-ideology of liberalism. And it's very sneaky, how they try to reform Islam. They introduce certain issues like, oh, women's rights. Women's rights are important in Islam, no doubt about it. But who defines women's rights? Just like we asked before, who defines what a human being is? they want to really play on people's emotions. Our women are being abused and oppressed, and we have to change the way we structure our masajid, and we have to change the way that we, what the Sharia says about rights and responsibilities, because the poor women, like this kind of emotional tactic, like that documentary. Oh, we have to reform our masajid, and our imams are too harsh, and imams really need to do this and that. They play the emotional card, and if you're not aware of that strategy, you might fall into, okay, yeah, maybe they have a point. Maybe we need to be softer. Maybe we need to change. Maybe we need to update. So it's mind games. It's because they have to be very tricky with Muslims. Muslims are just extreme in a good way. We're extreme in holding on to our way of life. And they are trying all kinds of psychological techniques to break that. So we have to be aware, and just by holding on to deen like a hot coal, holding on to Quran and Sunnah and the way of life like a hot coal, that is all it takes to destroy liberalism. Yes?
What are other strategies besides emotionally attacking Muslims?
What other tactics do they use to attack? What tactics do liberals use to attack Islam other than emotional tactics? Another tactic is co-opting religious figures. So what they do is they will put a liberal person. They will promote a liberal imam and put him on TV and promote him on social media and promote him on the news, put him in a position of high visibility. And he looks like an imam, he talks like an imam, but actually he's a liberal. Actually, he's a liberal. He promotes a liberal message. He uses Quran and Hadith to promote a liberal message. And he'll say things like, yeah, the Prophet ﷺ was a feminist. The Prophet ﷺ cared about women's rights and was a feminist. The Prophet and the way they do this is that they will cite things partially. They cite a partial thing. And then the whole point of their message is that Islam is a liberal religion. This is a very deadly, very dangerous tactic. Because Muslims, if you see an imam, you want to show respect. And this was used from the very beginning of liberalism in the Enlightenment period, when the European colonizers went to the Muslim world, like Napoleon invaded Egypt. His tactic was to say, okay, the Muslims are going to do jihad against us. They're going to try to do jihad against us. They've tried it. But what if we say that actually we're Muslims? So Napoleon claimed to be Muslim, and the French colonizers, the colonial officials, claimed to be Muslim. And they said, oh, if you do takfir of us, then that is extreme. Don't do takfir of us. We're Muslims. We have a right to rule over you. And being Muslim means being liberal, accepting these liberal values, accepting democracy and French rule. So this is an infiltration tactic. It's extremely dangerous. How do you fight back against it? It's the same answer from before. You have to recognize this is what Islam says. This is what the Quran and Sunnah say. We're not going to compromise on our religion. Yeah.
So if somebody that's like a Muslim and they're starting to become liberal, what can you do to put them back to like traditional Islam without them getting mad at you or try to address that diplomatically?
So if someone is a Muslim who's being liberalized, how do you counter that? One of the biggest ways to counter it is just to point out how the world is crumbling all around us and how liberal societies are being destroyed. How what's crucial at this moment, especially in history, is that liberal power is decreasing in the world. And you see other powers like Russia and China are increasing in power. So now we're going into a multipolar world. And that creates a more of an opportunity to say that, okay, if liberalism is so good, then why has it led to the downfall of the West? Why is the West on the decline? Why is crime at its highest ever levels? Why is suicide at the highest ever levels? Why is depression at the highest ever levels? Why do we see all of these problems? The breakdown of marriage, the breakdown of family, all of these statistics show that there is social decline and decline in power and economics and all of these different metrics. You can point to the news, and the news is like documenting it step by step. All kinds of crazy headlines. So the one thing that I do a lot are memes and mockery and stuff like this. So then, you see a headline about like the kind of social decay, and you share that. You share like, look at what the liberal West is all about. Look at what liberalism has brought. Is this the so-called superior West? And that really sends a powerful message. Now, let me answer one from this chat. How to stand firm against people like this, especially as teenagers attending public school where all this fitna is so prevalent. Yeah, if you're a teenager attending public school, see if your parents will homeschool you. But the way that you as a teenager should really avoid this fitna in school is to not be friends with liberal people. Avoid certain people. You are going to be on the same religion as your friends, as the Prophet ﷺ said. So avoid being friends and having a social circle that is full of liberal people. That's the most important thing. And teenagers will say, oh, but I really like my friends, and oh, how am I going to not have these friends? When you get a little bit older, you'll forget even the people who are in your school. So it's not a big loss. What are other sub-branches of liberalism other than feminism and LGBT? Yeah, so liberalism is a big umbrella. You have basically every single political theory and economic theory falls under this umbrella of liberalism. I'll explain to you why. So communism is a liberal philosophy. Socialism is a liberal philosophy. Capitalism is a liberal philosophy. Anarchism is a liberal philosophy. Why? All of these are liberal philosophies because they want to maximize your individual happiness and freedom. They just have different approaches to how to accomplish that or how to achieve that. So that's what makes them liberal. Then you have feminism, you have secularism. Secularism refers to the government, separation of church and state. That's a liberal philosophy because how do we maximize the people in a nation, their happiness? We have to make sure to separate church and state. Yeah, these are all sub-branches. Yes.
Earlier you said that the liberal leaders are mostly atheists, but I kind of question that because what outside of the whole agenda of like why they want us to maximize our happiness, what are they benefiting from? Like how are they benefiting from that? And I would say that they're more of Satanists in that regard from my happiness.
How are they benefiting from your happiness? So yeah, you can say that underneath it all, this is a satanic agenda. Liberalism is a satanic ideology because it's a kind of worship of yourself. Like you prioritize your own pleasure over everything else. That's a kind of satanic mentality. Nafsi, 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 myself, myself, myself. That's a satanic kind of mindset. But as for the people who are leading liberalism, they claim that it is they do care about people's happiness. They do want to create a utopia. They do want to create the best possible world. Whether they're sincere in that or not, Allahu A'lam, but at least that is what their claim is. Yeah, you have to question whether do they really believe that increasing people's happiness means, telling a girl that, oh, you identify as a man, therefore go and have this operation. Like, that seems pretty satanic. if they really believe that.
And then how are you benefiting from that?
How the person getting the operation?
The liberal leader, how are they benefiting from that? I'm getting an operation.
That's a good question. But they might feel a satisfaction in thinking that they're doing something good for the world. So, yes.
Liberalism, does that destroy all or basically most of human rights? Because if you consider a simple example where there are 100 people, everyone earns basic income except for one individual who has a lot of money. If the goal of liberalism is to increase personal pleasure of each individual as much as possible, if all the individuals just stole the money from the richest guy, that would theoretically increase individual liberty and the individual happiness of 99 people at the expense of that one person. So it's the same logic. There really isn't that clear definition of human rights with liberalism, is there?
No, there is. Like what you just described, that we have to reappropriate the wealth of wealthy individuals. That's like socialism, or that's like communism. So they do have that. That is a part of a liberal theory. The communists would just say that private property is not a human right, but other human rights apply. Like you have the right to healthcare, you have the right to education, you have like the individual right for X, Y, Z. It doesn't necessarily destroy the concept of individual rights or human rights.
But they destroy, let's say, the right to someone else. So, for example, to make other people happy, you have to sacrifice the right of being able to, let's say, for example, say someone has a he or a she, because you have to first learn what the other person's gender is, and then you can speak.
Yeah, people are going to claim that there are certain rights that take priority over other rights, but they're still talking about human rights. They just have different definitions of, or they draw the lines in different ways, but they're still talking about human rights. The way to really question human rights is to question, well, what is a human being? And what is going to benefit human beings? All of these different theories, material theories, secular theories, they assume that humans are like pleasure-seeking robots. And you can't really question human rights. Like if Muslims want to question the human rights regime and debunk it or to criticize it, we have to say that no, we don't accept this definition of human beings. Like a human being is a human that has been created by Allah on the fitrah to worship Allah. That is a human need. It's a necessity. If you have that understanding of human rights, countries that promote atheism are human rights violators, because you're attacking the purpose of being a human being. You're spreading atheism. You've built these schools that prioritize a science education, and the science education creates atheism. Why? Because a science education says that the only things that are real are things that are established by scientific research. Everything else is opinion. We talked about this yesterday, actually, in another talk, that the public school system is designed to create atheists, or people that they don't really believe that religion is about facts. Religion is just about opinions. So maybe I can do the same thing that I did yesterday. Does anyone in has gone through public school and learned like the difference between fact and opinion? Someone. So okay, if you've done it. Okay, what's a fact?
Something that's been proven, reasoning. Something
that's been proven as a fact. Like, can you explain more what proving it means?
Capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. and opinion is something that someone says.
Okay, so fact is something that is proven and verifiable, and an opinion is just what someone says. So here's the question. Here's my claim. Killing someone is wrong. Killing someone for no reason is wrong. Is that a fact or opinion?
That would be classified as an opinion.
That would be classified as opinion. What if I say that hellfire exists? Is that fact or opinion? Hellfire exists as an opinion. Allah exists. Is that a fact or opinion?
If you say they would classify it as an opinion, although
according to what you learned, or the definition that you get. Okay, Allah exists as an opinion. Do you see the problem? So that means all of religion, all the claims of religion, the moral claims, the ontological claims about like what exists, Allah exists, Jannah exists, Nar exists, angels exist. All of these are in the realm of opinion. In the realm of facts are what? Science, history that we've recorded. That's the realm of facts. So when you go through the educational system and you learn this fact-opinion distinction, you've destroyed people's, because these are not opinions. Allah existing is not an opinion; it's a fact. It's the central fact of all existence is that Allah exists. The central fact of all reality is that Allah exists. That Islam is haqq, that's a fact. It's not an opinion. So imagine you as a Muslim, you're going through this public school system. And then the thing is, many Islamic schools will also adopt the same curriculum, the same material. Oh, this is fact and opinion. They're basically preaching atheism, but they don't realize it. They don't realize that they're teaching atheism. They're teaching the psychology that leads to atheism. And then we wonder, oh, why are so many children or Muslims having problems with basic Islamic concepts? It's because of the public school system, the educational system. So, what was the original question? About human rights?
I think you answered that question.
Okay. Yeah, but it's very important to recognize that I talk to Muslims all the time who are young, and they have this problem about, wait, I don't get it. What do you mean? When you say that Allah exists, don't you mean in our opinion Allah exists? And I have to tell them, no, don't use that language. It's not in our opinion, it's a fact. This is reality. And if you have doubts about it or you think it's only our perspective, then that's actually dangerous for your iman. You have to know, you have to have knowledge that Allah exists. That's a part of iman. You have to know it and you have to testify it. So these basic concepts are very dangerous, and they're being commonly taught to children and our youth. So may Allah protect us. Yes. Right.
I want to ask, how do you defend the enforcement of like gender segregation and hijab from liberals and feminists?
How do you enforce it?
How do you defend like the Islamic concept of enforcing gender segregation and hijab?
How do you defend gender segregation and hijab, like from an Islamic basis, or you mean from
Basis if like a feminist or liberal question this?
a Muslim feminist?
Yeah, or even non-Muslim feminist.
In what context?
Like if a feminist asks, what's it called? How can you enforce hijab? Like trying to give the woman the choice to wear a hijab rather than like enforcing it, let's say in a country, almost in a country, right? They question why is the country allowed to enforce hijab or gender segregation? How do you defend? How do you explain that? How do you defend the concept?
So the question is, how do you defend the concept of enforcing or imposing hijab and gender segregation? Because you have feminists who will say, oh, but what about a woman's choice? What about her choice? So there are many ways to defend it, but a simple way is that, okay, well, do you accept that people can't just go walk around naked in the streets? Do you accept that? Usually, if it's a Muslim, they'll say, yeah, well, obviously. Okay, well, then you're enforcing a certain standard of dress on people. So why is that okay? What about people's choice? Maybe people want to just... There are people, actually. There are people, they're called nudists. They think that there should be no dress code. You should just be like animals and go out, and there should be no problem with that. And Muslims get in trouble when they start opposing, like, so certain countries will have hijab ban or abaya ban. Like, oh, the hijab is banned in France, for example, in schools. And they'll say, oh, this is violating religious freedom, and women should have a choice. If they want to dress like this, they should be allowed to dress like this. If you use that kind of argument, you're using a liberal argument to defend the hijab, but this is a problem. Because then the nudists come to you and say, okay, you as a Muslim are in favor of freedom of choice, so you support us nudists, right? We choose not to wear clothes, so you support it. And then the Muslim has to backtrack and basically go back on what they're saying. So this is the problem, that when you use liberal arguments, you get in trouble. The way to respond is that, well, choice is not everything. Sometimes your personal choice doesn't matter. Sometimes your personal choice has to be restricted for the benefit of a larger institution. If you your individual choice will increase zina in society. Your individual choice will increase immorality in society. Your individual choice will increase all kinds of fawahish in society. That is preventing all of that is more important than what you personally want. Khalas, that's it. What the person who is emphasizing the personal choice, they have just assumed this idea that what's most important is individual happiness. What's most important is individual happiness. We reject that.
How do we address the topic of LGBTQ as scholars or as mentors, as leaders in community with wisdom? So they're not being called out, and at the same time, the topic is being addressed. It's a major concern of Muslims here, or the main area that we all are concerned about. But at the same time, with the schooling system, people add it too hard, they start calling you out, or no one wants to go to prison for it, for example, for violating the rights.
You will not go to prison for criticizing LGBT. You will not go to prison. There's no criminal prosecution for you to express your religious commitments, your religious beliefs. So this is not a problem in the United States. There is no police that are going to knock on your door if you say that homosexuality is immoral, transgenderism is immoral, and it is the peak of immorality. It is actually the peak of fahisha, and it's something that will destroy society in the way that Qawm Lut were destroyed. So the way to address the issue of LGBT and with the most wisdom is to just share the story of Lut alayhi salam, the prophet, and his people. Share that story. That is the most wise and beneficial way to address with the words of Allah. And it's completely legal. It's as of now. So that's how you address it. Yeah, the same method with elaboration and explanation. So this is something that is part of the fitra. It's fitra that certain behaviors are immoral, they're disgusting, they are lascivious, promiscuous, and that is part of the fitra. Now, if you want to really hammer the point home, there's all kinds of information that you can share about this quote-unquote lifestyle that are quite shocking. You know, the idea of Qawm Lut as being just like everyone else, except they have a preference for the same sex, this is whitewashing of the reality of Qawm Lut. The reality of Qawm Lut is expressed in the Quran. The reality of Qawm Lut is expressed in the Quran. They're extremely violent, aggressive rather, I should say. They're extremely aggressive. They want to force everyone to accept them. And if you don't accept them, they will try to harm you and expel you from your homes. This is what we read about Qawm Lut, and that's exactly what we see around us. So how do you convey that to a non-Muslim, well, you can share, like, look how aggressively they're trying to impose their views on children. This is actually why the tide has been turning on LGBT in American society. They're like, why are they demanding that our children accept this? Why are they demanding to show these pictures in schools and to have drag queen story hour in schools? Why are they so aggressive? Like, it's shocking to people, and this is waking them up. So there are many things that you can point to that any reasonable non-Muslim will also find a lot of common ground with you on, inshallah. Yes.
Recently, there's been certain members in our community, not the very well-known ones, but even the members of our community who are now reinterpreting in the Quran when it talks about Qawm. They're making these very fringe arguments about action versus intention and things like that. How do we respond to those members within our community that aren't ulama, that have fallen out of, they've left kind of that kind of guidance, but they're obviously being propped up by somebody who disbelieves the ulama?
What specifically do they say about?
Like they make this argument that when the Quran speaks about Qawm, it makes a distinction between action versus intention. They're saying that the Quran doesn't condemn the action, it rather just.
So when the adhab came, only the actions of the Qawm Lut were destroyed, the people were saved?
Yeah, so
How does that make sense?
Yeah, what they say is that those specific people that came to Prophet Lut, they were rapist, murder, but it does not condemn the whole community. So they're making all these fringe arguments now, and getting away from the topic.
Yeah, so the question is, you have people who are making these bizarre arguments that, when you read the Quran, it's not all of Qawm Lut that is condemned, it's only a part of them, and we shouldn't have this kind of negative attitude towards modern day Qawm Lut. This is nonsense. Like, the Quran, Allah doesn't make any distinction. He didn't say, we saved part of them. The only people who were saved was Lut alayhi salam and his family, except his wife. Those are the only ones who are saved, and they're the ones who are opposed. So all of the people were destroyed. There wasn't any exceptions mentioned in the Quran. So I don't really understand what this argument amounts to. The argument that a lot of these deviants have made is, well, the Quran is really referring not to same-sex behavior or homosexual behavior. Rather, it's referring to murder and assault, and that's what's condemned in the Quran. They've taken this from Christian reformists, because Christian reformists started making this argument about the Bible, because you also have the story of Qawm Lut is mentioned in the Bible as well, and that they were destroyed, that's also mentioned. So Christian liberals 50 years ago started making this kind of argument, and then these Muslim deviants, or actually I don't even consider them Muslim, they are taken outside of Islam by making the haram halal. They are saying that, the Quran is the same. It's not a condemnation of this behavior, it's a condemnation of something else. So that's easy to refute. No one has understood the Quran in this way. The language of the Quran is clear exactly why Allah is condemning them. You approach men with desire instead of women. It's very explicit in the Quran. How can you get around that? You can't. Yes. Wa alaikum salam.
My question is, how can laymen like us, what can laymen like us to combat liberalism, particularly in the high school setting?
How can you combat liberalism in a high school setting? Just stick to your religion. Stick to Islam. Wherever you see any violation of Islam, just avoid that. Don't involve yourself, don't mix yourself with that. That's the best thing that you can do to fight liberalism. Worry about yourself, protect yourself.
And then how can you do outreach to our friends or maybe them go up a little bit?
Yeah, you have to make a cost-benefit analysis, because sometimes If you want to help a friend, like for example, if someone is drowning, sometimes if you try to save them, you'll drown with them. So the priority is yourself, save yourself, and this is a clear Islamic principle. You should not sacrifice yourself to help someone else who's in trouble.
So, but then when our youngsters listen to YouTube, different leaders and different speakers out there, how do they filter out who's right? And how do they know that this is their coming from Islam and I should be following instead of just looking at the amount of views that person got?
So to repeat the Imam's question, how do our youth filter out which Imams online on YouTube to listen to? How can they identify who's really a liberal and who's not? The easy answer is they should just consult with you and ask you. No, really, that's the real answer. They should ask, Maulana Omar. They should ask qualified scholars in the community. Who should we listen to? That's the advice. Yes.
I was gonna ask, so from I guess personal experience, I guess a study showed that women tend to be more compassionate towards this, and I feel like sometimes the agenda is targeted towards women. How do you think the best way to go about like addressing like women or families like our lives and just
About what? How do we address?
how to, I guess, challenge their understanding because they're being challenged on their Islamic understanding. So how do we kind of go about it lightly because we don't want to be too harsh, turn them away. The same thing like we were saying earlier, like that's kind of the trap, like where they say, oh, they're being too harsh. Then
Harsh on LGBT or harsh on?
like anything like the liberal agenda in general. So like hijab, LGBT, all of the same thing even with what you were saying about like, oh, we need to be softer towards these other people because we need to welcome everybody into the masjid, even though they might not want to comply with the masjid's rules. What's like a middle ground way to approach?
So the question is, how? Just to repeat it for those on Zoom, how do we? Women and girls are more compassionate, and therefore they're more vulnerable to this kind of message of tolerance and accepting liberals and LGBT and all of these other deviant groups. So how do we strike a balance in advising them?
And do you think they're targeted more?
And are they targeted more? Are women targeted more? Yes, definitely. Like that's the entry point for the Muslim community. And it was actually expressed like in a White House memo that was leaked, that if we want to really infiltrate the Muslim community and liberalize Muslims, we have to promote women leaders, and we have to target women and get them on board, and that will allow us to really control the Muslim community. This is actually a universal strategy for influencing people, and it's actually found in the Quran. The Prophet Sulaiman, that's the tactic that he used actually. Without going into further tafsir of that, but the approach, it really depends on which kind of female family members. But oftentimes your female family members will look to you as a man for leadership, and the kind of attitude that you express, they will adopt that. Even subconsciously, they will adopt that. So you have to be very clear and provide that moral standard. You have to be very clear-cut and harsh. You're not harsh to them, but you're harsh on the issue. Like, this is clear-cut. This is an area of Islam. There's no ikhtilaf. There's no flexibility on this. This is batil. This is fahisha, or whatever it may be. You be very clear-cut. Then your female family members, inshallah, they will take from that and they will follow that. That's a general guidance that I would give. Okay. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وهاجا وأنزلنا من المعصرات ماء ثجاجا لنخرج به حبا ونباتا وجنات ألفافا إن يوم الفصل كان ميقاتا يوم ينفخ في الصور فتأتون أفواجا وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا إن جهنم كانت مرصادا للطاغين مآبا لابثين فيها أحقابا لا يذوقون فيها بردا ولا شرابا إلا حميما وغساقا جزاء وفاقا إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا وكذبوا بآياتنا كذابا وكل شيء أحصيناه كتابا فذوقوا فلن نزيدكم إلا عذابا إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا.